All right, if everyone can get their seats, we're going to get started momentarily. Oh, are you done with? All right. We're going to get started with our meeting. And if there's anybody else coming in, we'll just allow them to come in while we get started. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for coming to this public meeting hosted by Salford Township. Please note this meeting is being recorded. The township invited the DEP to this meeting to address well loss complaints. Please take a moment to silence your cell phones at this time. I'd like to start with introductions and acknowledgments as folks continue to filter in. My name is Stephanie Berardi, and I'm the Regional Communications Manager here at the DEP in the Southeast region. We have several folks here from the DEP, starting with the program staff from our Pottsville Mining District Office. The District Mining Manager, Michael Cutney. We also have Permits Chief, Tiffany Folk. Compliance Manager, Ross Clock. Licensed Professional Geologist, Mike Enott. And James Andrews. And Local Government Liaison, we have Lisa Strobridge. And I'd like to take a minute to acknowledge our elected officials who are over here. Kyle Melander, our District Director from Congressman Fitzpatrick's office. State Representative Milu McKenzie from the 131 Legislative District. And Senator Colette's office is virtually joining us today, so thank you. And I'd also like to collectively acknowledge members of Montgomery County Office of Public Health. Kyle Schmeck, he's our division director, as well as Jennifer Mercurio, who will be here to help assist with questions, as well as municipal officials from Salford Township and the surrounding communities. Today's meeting is focused on the history of groundwater resources, recent well complaints, factors that affect well yield, quarry operations, additional concerns, and next steps. The DEP is here to help answer any questions and concerns that you have today. The DEP reviews all well complaints and is in no way affiliated with the operator of the quarry. And now, I'd like to turn it over to Mike Enott to talk about the history of our groundwater resources. Mike, take it away.
Hello. The Pennsylvania Geological Survey studied the area over the years. Starting in 1934, they published groundwater in southeastern Pennsylvania. In 1971, they issued a book, Groundwater Resources of Montgomery County. In 1982, Engineering Characteristics of the Rocks of Pennsylvania. There were several others that they've done in this area, but they've just picked out 3 for now. In 1989, the operator applied for a surface mining permit. The quarry was to become Maysville Quarry. In 2002, Salford Township meeting minutes discussed some of the well decline back in 2002. This is from the 1971 book I just referenced, and it's you can see in bold, water problems resulting from the activities of man in Montgomery County, declining groundwater levels. This is a pre-mining map. This is what Naceville Quarry was to become. I've got a red dot. I hope you can see it. And at the time, there was, you can see like some acreages of farming and stuff like that. You can see Ridge Road goes from east to west. We got the turnpike. And this map is from March 1st of 1992. So you can actually see there's not much work has been done at the quarry. This is what the quarry looks like now. So you see the turnpike, Ridge Road, but you can actually see some high walls, a little bit of definition, and that's what our quarry looks like right now. This is showing all the wells. The dots in red are all the wells that were installed prior to 1971. The green dots are all the wells that were installed after 1971. And we actually have some of the complaints on there, too. We actually have them highlighted in black, so we included everything in there. But you can see there's a lot more wells since 1971 that are in the area. In February 2022, the DEP received complaints of low-yielding private water supply wells in Salford Township and West Rockhill Township. As of September 2024, 33 private water supply loss complaints have been reported to the Pottsville District Mining Office relating to Naceville Quarry. 9 of these complaints were related to non-supply issues. Well records for residential supply wells are maintained by the Montgomery County Office of Public Health. Permitting of the private water supplies began in 1997. 18 well permit applications for Salford Township were received from April 2023 to August 2024. The well yields varied that are on the permit. I'm going to ask if Kyle wants to say anything about the Montgomery County.
Yes, hi, good afternoon. Good afternoon, hi. Again, I'm Kyle Schmeck, the Division Director for Water Quality Management with the Montgomery County Office of Public Health. And I wanted to speak a little bit. I asked Mike if I could just explain a little bit about our program, and this was a good slide to do it. We've been permitting, as the slide I believe says, we've been permitting individual water supplies since February of 1997. And I wanted to talk about just a history of that. We put together a committee, the Water Quality Advisory Committee, made up of 25 plus people at the time, a lot of engineers, municipal officials, hydrogeologists, everybody got together to put these regulations together. Now the regulations it's important because we issue permits for private wells, and we regulate the construction standards, the location of the well, and we regulate the water quality, but not water quantity. That's really important to say because that's the issue at hand right now is a water quantity issue. So we'll issue that permit. We do collect data on the yield, but the yield, we usually give advice that a good estimate or a good adequate yield, generally, could be more, but at a minimum, 4 gallons per minute is a good yield. Now, wells are frequently drilled less than 4 gallons per minute, and that yield, when we see it, either the well driller or the water quality sewage enforcement officer or environmental health specialist that issues that permit will give recommendations, some basic ones about water conservation, but also about putting or installing a water storage tank or a pressure tank in addition to what they normally have to try to make up for that lack of a standard yield that most people do benefit from, but sometimes some don't. So I wanted to just mention that, and also we could probably, this will come up in a question I'm sure later, but that the health department's responsibility it really ends there. We don't authorize or make recommendations for public water infrastructure. That's not something that comes under our purview, and And also, we don't really have anybody on staff who's an expertise in hydrogeology. And I know there are several people here today that do have that expertise. We don't have that on staff. And I just wanted to mention quickly that in Montgomery County, I did a quick review of the database today. And I just picked 10 years going back. In 10 years, we either replaced or deepened 125 wells in Montgomery County overall. In the past 2 years, in Salford alone, we issued 18 permits. So which is basically, what did I figure out? Close to 15%, essentially, of the wells in the past 10 years. 15% of them were in the past 2 years here in Salford. And yes, and then the current drought status, I checked, is normal for all of PA, even right now, including Montgomery County, even though we are at a little bit of a deficit precipitation-wise. So I wanted to throw that out there. Often drought does affect well yield status as well. That's all. Thanks. And if you have any questions later on after the presentation, please feel free to ask me. Thanks, Mike.
Primary factors affecting the well yield are low water-yielding rock formations, reduced precipitation and aquifer recharge, water consumption and uses, and quarry effects within the zone of influence. The Brunswick and Lockatong formations are what's overlying Salford Township. You can see both of them bisect the quarry. So both those formations are in the bisect the quarry, but they're also in the area of Salford Township. These red dots are the recent well complaints we've got. We plotted them on here, and you can see most of them are following like the Ridge Road, and they're in the Lockatong formation. The Brunswick formation is chiefly a red shale. It's got small water-bearing supplies of about 1 to 10 gallons per minute. The Lockatong is a dense, hard shale with a little bit of sandstone. Those supplies are even less at 1 to 5 gallons per minute. And I want to note, failures to obtain water may occur in the Lockatong. This is showing an effects of a well in the Lockatong. If the Kona Depression isn't extensive, it's kind of confined to the well itself. It doesn't extend like to the stream. So, and the reason for that is the Lockatong doesn't have a lot of fractures to the rock, which contains the water. So the Kona Depression just stays kind of near the well itself. This is a map showing some of the relief. So in red, those are elevations of feet mean sea level. Red means it's higher, blue means it's lower. So think of it as a thermometer when you're looking at this. We plotted the 18 well complaints on here, and you can see they're at the very, very top of this ridge. You can see that they're all along Ridge Road, but they're all also along the ridge. Ridge Road's aptly named. And I wanted to point out between the quarry and the last complaint over here, there's 4 water drainage valleys. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's on the south side of the ridge. On the other side of the ridge, even though you don't see the relief on this, there's 1, 2, 3. Those are 7 water draining valleys between the quarry and those complaints down on Ridge Road. This is better a 3D perspective. We're going to try to get you to see some of the relief of this. So the wells or the complaints are plotted on there. It shows the valleys a little bit better on that. You can see where the quarry is. And water always wants to go from a high to a low. And the blue at the bottom of this, or blue or purple, that's actually the east branch of the Perkiomen Creek. So here we have 2 wells. The wells in valleys have more available drawdown than wells on hills, and this is what this is showing. So the wells are the same depth, but you can see that the well on top of a ridge will have a less of a supply than a well at the bottom of the valley. This is showing the subsurface. If we had sand, sand's going to hold the water. You know, you can see it. You know, if a well's drilled in sand, you're going to have water in it because the sand's porous. In rock, it's a different story. It's a solid, and the water enters the rock through fractures in the rock. And then you have to have several of those together to kind of get like a decent supply. So this is what is illustrating that The black is the water that's in the fracture. And going back to this slide, just referring to this, when I was mentioning about 1 to 10 gallons per minute for the Brunswick and 1 to 5 for the Lockatong, the Lockatong has fewer fractures than the Brunswick in its formation, and the fractures are much narrower than the Brunswick. So water has a tougher chance even getting into the Lockatong formation. This is showing two wells within a fractured system. So you can see the well 1 is on the left, well 2 is on the right. On well 1, there's 2 fractures intersecting it, but only one of them has water in it. So well 2 was drilled. They were fortunate. They've got a lot of fractures that are intersecting where that well is, and it's got a nice supply of water. We also look at precipitation data when we're talking about the history of what's going on with some of the water supplies. And this is the Sellersville Weather Station. It's about a few miles from the quarry. That's the data we got this from. And the Montgomery County annual average is about 43 to 47 inches of rain per year. Now, we track this back the last 5 years. If you look at 2019 and 2020, they've got greater than 50 inches of rain, so it's well above the average those 2 years. But look what happened in 2021. It dropped to 43.91, which is on the low end of the average. However, in February of 2022 is when we started getting these well complaints. The last couple of years, about 48, just above average, and as of August 31st, they've had 33.29 inches of rain. The water table fluctuates throughout the year. Due to evapotranspiration losses throughout the growing season from April to October, little recharge reaches the aquifer and the water levels decline. Water levels generally rise throughout the rest of the year due to dormant plant activity and limited evaporation during cold weather months from November to March. This is showing your water cycle. You probably remember this from school when you were in elementary school, but this is precipitation's coming down. You have evaporation is going right back up to the clouds. You've got some infiltration into the ground. And you've got some water that goes right to the streams and in the creeks and flows away. This is a Montgomery County observation well, and this well doesn't get pumped or used. All it's doing is looking at the static water through the years. Nothing happens to this well, so you can see what the water is. And I wanted to go back to when I said that the water levels declined from the April to October month. So unfortunately, it doesn't happen right at April in this figure, but if you look at May first and just start going toward October, you can see the water levels are declining all the way to October. That's because water is coming down, the plants are using it, it's a higher temperature, much more of it's being evaporated away, so it's not going to reach the aquifer down below. So when the temperatures go away, the plants go dormant, the water levels will start recharging from October, November, up into March. This is showing the annual recharge by county. Montgomery County is on the bottom, and Montgomery County gets about 10 to 12 inches of recharge per year. It's kind of low in compared to the other counties of Pennsylvania. All right, this map is showing the number of wells per acre. So red, again, meaning high, that means there's a lot more wells per acre. Blue meaning there's not that many, or blue or purple at the bottom. We plotted the well complaints and also all the other wells in the area. And the areas of red means there's a whole lot of wells in that little acreage there. So you can see there's a couple places right along there. And again, that's right along the top of Ridge Road when you see these wells. This is back from the document from 1971. And the two most obvious solutions are to connect to another water supply and to space wells further apart. You can see from the previous slide, there's a lot more wells that were installed since 71. This is showing some more factors of affecting the well yield. So you've got two wells. You got well 2 on the left, you got well 1 on the right, and you got the water table. Now, well 1 begins to get pumped, and you can see the water table will form a cone of depression. The water level will start dropping down. If you activate well 2 as well, that cone of depression will drop down even further. And this is well deepening effect. So again, we go back to the one slide that we had before. We're just going to illustrate this with 3 slides. Here you got the 2 wells. They're about the same depth, and they got some water in. So say over the course of the summer, the water levels decline just naturally. That's what we'll see on the next slide. There's only a little bit of water in the wells. So the well 2 owner says, you know what, I'm worried about getting my, having a proper well supply. I'm going to deepen my well. And look what happens when he deepens his well. He dewaters the well on the left because the water table has dropped. Some other common well usages are households. A family of 4 uses approximately 400 gallons a day. That's a little high. That's like an EPA number, but we'll just use it for now. Restaurants will use 5,800 gallons per day. Farming per acre when irrigating will use 27,154 gallons for 1 inch of water. Livestock will use 10 to 12 to 25 gallons per day per adult beef cow. And topping off a swimming pool will use 12,000 to 31,000 gallons per year. That's not to fill the pool. That's just to top it off. Because when it's hot out, evaporation, the rule of thumb is you'll lose 1/4 of an inch per day. And I'm going to show a series of pictures of the quarry. And this is kind of just like a background of where the photos were taken from. So I've got about 5 pictures here. And this is the overview of the quarry. If you look to the right, that's where the machinery is to break the stone. It's right below like the green that you see there. And they're working on making the stone smaller sizes. If you look in the middle, there's a light brown and a dark brown area. That's where the groundwater is actually seeping into the quarry. And this is what it looks like, more of a close-up. And you see it's not much. It's almost not even really a puddle, but it's right there. And they have a little channel so they have a containment, but that's how the water is coming into the quarry. This is the quarry floor at 305 feet mean sea level, and this is the current permitted depth. They started working on this level back in late 2022. There's 2 other areas where water seeps into the quarry. It's actually kind of north of where I showed you on the right there. There's another spot, and directly behind me where I took this picture from. And the day I was there, there was no water that was seeping in. And I found out that generally only happens when it's raining at the quarry. So the water that seeps in is channeled or transferred to this sump. And the sump's got a pump in it, and it's got 2 floats. So when the sump gets higher up, a pump will be engaged, and the water is pumped up through this discharge line. And just to reiterate, that light blue dot is where the water is seeping into the quarry. The dark blue dot is the sump. And the discharge line, it's a yellow line, it goes up, and it actually is buried underneath where they're working on the activities for the quarry. It comes up the far sidewall, goes to the surface, and it's going to fall like the tree line back to our discharge point that we see there. And that's what the discharge point is. It's just basically a culvert. You see the discharge line, the water going into it, and it actually flows. I'm sorry I couldn't get a better picture because of the vegetation. It's flowing into an unnamed tributary behind it. And the water that it was transferred from the quarry is going back to the same water basin it came from. It's not going like a mile away. It's going right back to where it belongs. And this is showing an overview of that. There's a discharge line, and these are all unnamed tributaries. They all lead northwest to Ridge Valley Creek. So the quarry is currently approved to pump 500,000 gallons per day, which is roughly 348 gallons per minute. The pumping is for stormwater management and keeping the quarry floor dry. It's not for consumptive use. The discharge is not continuous. And the discharge, as we said, it depends on what the water in the sump is. And just to reiterate, the quarry discharge is into an unnamed tributary flowing into Ridge Valley Creek. And we have a video showing what the discharge is. Or maybe not.
Sorry. Not quite yet.
We'll skip it. We're going to try to show it at the end. It always happens on these presentations. So, no? Okay. We'll see if we can resolve it later on, and we'll show it later. I'm going to turn it over to Mike Cutney. He's the district mining manager. He's been dealing with the quarry for a number of years.
Thank you, Mike. So what we're going to show you here is a hydrograph, and it's going to show you two different pieces of information are plotted on this map or on this graph. The horizontal axis, the x-axis, is time. It's October of 2019 through September of 2024. Over on this axis is inches of precipitation, and that's averaged over the course of the month. For each one of these is a month. And over on the far right side is the average volume of quarry discharge, and that's the orange line that moves throughout the graph. And what the purpose of this is we look at this at a lot of our quarries, is to see if there's water being pumped that can't be attributed to rainwater and precipitation. So if there's large volumes of water that's being pumped in the absence of rainfall, that means it's probably groundwater that's being pumped instead of stormwater, rainwater. And what this graph shows roughly is that the quarry pumps in response to precipitation. There's no large pumping times when there isn't a preceding precipitation. Next. And at this quarry and many others there's a monitoring well network that's set up around the quarry. Many of these monitoring wells are residential wells that people have graciously allowed the quarry to use to keep track of the groundwater in and around the quarry. I guess just for reference, I think we are here. I think that's the Tylersport Fire Hall. County Line Road, Allentown Road. Next. And this is another hydrograph that is showing the plot of those wells we just looked at. Again, on the vertical or on the horizontal axis, it's time from January of 2019 through May of 2024. And on this side is elevation in mean feet sea level. And what this is over time the quarry measures the groundwater elevation at each of these wells and reports it. So each one of these little points is somebody went out and collected that data. And what you can see is, yes, there are some declines, and the decline is approximately 40 to 60 feet at the deepest parts. Some areas, there's no decline. And to be clear, you're allowed to lower groundwater elevations as part of mining operations. That's part of what's allowed in the regs. Where we step in is when that decline in water elevation affects a person or private or public water supply. And the quarry is obligated under the Chapter 77 non-coal mining law or mining regs to replace that supply. Right. And so one of the other things we use to help evaluate whether or not a quarry has affected your well is a groundwater model that they put together, or they had this company put together in 2014. There was a series of well complaints in the 2014 timeframe, and in response to that, we required the quarry to give us a groundwater model to show what was going on in and around the area. And I guess there's a couple things that are of interest here. There's this large black irregular, not even a circle, around the quarry. This is the quarry, and what that is it's the model space. It's where the geologist who put in the modeler who put the groundwater model together. That's the area that exists in the computer model. And in here, on these red lines concentric around the quarry, are the modeled drawdown of water around from the quarry. And this map shows the maximum drawdown at the maximum depth of the quarry and the maximum lateral growth of the quarry. The quarry is currently at its maximum depth, permitted depth, and it is, as I understand, about half laterally out. It's not at its full build out. However, we use this as though it was at the full build out. And one of the things that, and Mike has been the guy who's investigated the vast majority of the well complaints here recently, I think all of them, is we use this zone of influence map to help decide if somebody is highly likely to have been impacted by the quarry. What we'll do, and Tiffany is going to talk about this too, is we sort of fast track that through to the quarry to say, just get out there and fix it, if we can. But we go into a number of, and those of you, I'm sure there's some of you in here who've had a report done by Mike. We look at quite a bit of things. We look at all the stuff that he's just talked about and your current conditions at your well. And so this is just one of the tools we use to help decide whether or not the quarry's impacted your well. And I think that's it. Here, Tiffany's up.
Hello. I'll be discussing one of the additional concerns. An additional concern residents have is water quality. Water quality is primarily based on the composition of the rock formation the well is drilled into. For example, if your well is drilled into a rock formation that is high in calcium, magnesium, you may have hard water. Non-coal mining activities at the Naceville Quarry do not include any processes that would introduce materials into the aquifer. Groundwater is drawn toward the quarry, as shown in the zone of influence that Mike just explained. We have received water quality complaints from residents. The investigations to date have concluded that non-coal mining activities at the Naceville Quarry have not impacted the groundwater quality. I'm now going to pass this to Ross to discuss blasting concerns.
Good afternoon. The quarry does blast. They've done between 50 to 51 shots for 2024. All blast records and blasting is monitored by us. We have a mining inspector that looks at them, and then we have a blasting inspector who does a much more intense technical review. We have very specific guidelines in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania pertaining to vibrations. It takes a certain amount of energy to damage things, so therefore they're required to do seismic monitoring. Monitoring is required for all shots at this quarry. To date, they have never exceeded. They have not exceeded the limits pertaining to vibrations. So there's been no violation cited as far as blasting goes. So we've had, We've had 9 related blasting complaints pertaining to, only one was about structural damage. The rest have been pertaining to wells. At this point, it has not been founded that blasting had any relation to the low water situations in water wells.
I will be discussing some next steps. One step a resident can take is to continue to contact the Pottsville District Mining Office if you believe non-coal mining activities have impacted your well. Another step a resident can take is to visit the Montgomery County website to read the fact sheet using low-yielding wells from the Penn State Extension. This fact sheet contains several steps residents can take to increase well adequacy. One step would be to reduce peak water use at times, such as spread your laundry out all through the week instead of doing laundry day on Saturday. Another idea is to increase water storage by installing pressure tanks, intermediate storage systems, or increasing the borehole storage by deepening your well. And I will move on to the Pottsville District Mining process of well complaints. If you believe that non-coal mining activities have impacted your well, you can contact the Pottsville District Mining Office to file a complaint. You will need to supply your name, address, and description of your concern. All complaints are confidential, and a preliminary review is done using the location of the well. If the well is located in the quarry's zone of influence, the department staff will contact you and ask if you will waive confidentiality. At that point, department staff will contact H&K or Nace-Fill Materials, and we'll have them go out to the well and look at it. They're going to look and see if it's related to well loss or if it's a mechanical problem. If it's a well loss, they will be required to replace that water system. If it is mechanical, they are not responsible for any mechanical issues. If the well is not located in the quarry zone of influence, staff will be assigned to conduct a well investigation. That staff will contact the complainant to set up a time and date to evaluate the well. The evaluation may include dropping a well tape into your well, and that's going to measure the depth of water from the top of the casing. The staff will also go out to the quarry to see if there's anything going on there. When the staff gets back to the office, they're going to start gathering additional information to use for their report. They're going to look at precipitation, pumping data from the quarry, groundwater elevations at the quarry monitoring wells. They're going to look at those publications that we were just showing on the slides. The report is then, it's written, and then it's peer-reviewed and finalized. Once it's finalized, it is sent to the complainant. The complainant, from the day they receive the complaint, has 30 days to file an appeal with the Environmental Hearing Board. Some helpful information that helps us during our investigation are obviously your name and address, how long you have lived in the home, the date the well reduction or loss occurred, the total depth of your well, the depth to water, and where your pump was set in the water column. You don't need to give us this information. You might not know it, but that's okay. It's just, it helps us during our investigation. And this is our contact information, Pottsville District Mining Office. We are located at 5 West Laurel Boulevard, Pottsville, Pennsylvania, 17901. Our phone number is 570-621-3118. And our email is ra-pottsvillemining@pa.gov. I'm now going to turn this over to Stephanie.
Thank you, Tiffany, and thanks everyone from our Pottsville office. We're now going to move into questions. It is my goal today to keep us focused and on track and to make sure that we're getting through as many questions as we can. This time is not intended for a general airing of grievances, but rather an opportunity to exchange information. General statements, concerns, points of clarification, or general remarks can be submitted at any time to the project resource account that was on our screen. Questions and well complaints submitted to the resource account are reviewed and investigated. This time is reserved for questions regarding general quarry operations and well yields, and not for individual well complaints. During the question and answer, I'm going to begin by asking several questions that were received in advance of the meeting. I will ask them in the order that they were received.
Would you please announce for the people attending virtually that the email address is on the live stream where they can send their questions?
The folks that are online can submit their questions via email, and we will get to those questions. And it's also on the live stream. Okay. So I'm going to ask some questions that were submitted to us by the township. These were from the community. So we'll get started with those first. And once we complete those, we will move on to audience questions. So we'll go to background questions first. And I'm going to turn this over to Mike Cutney. And we're going to ask, what research has the DEP done since we've started having more well issues in the recent years?
We're going to switch in order, but I'm going to answer the questions at the top here. So,
Okay.
But you can see how we research these things. We're looking back on the Pennsylvania Geologic Survey. They studied all these rocks for years in the groundwater. We look at the mining permit. We're looking at the monitoring well data that we can get. Meteorological data. We're also looking at this. I didn't do it on this presentation just for time, but also the base flow of the region, what we're seeing there. But those are some of the things that we examine, and we try to think of anything else we can look at.
Okay, is there any geological environmental concern on the DEP radar that this many people are having issues?
Yeah, we invested a bunch of these complaints, and we, kind of realized what's happening over here. And what we're doing now, I've got 2 slides. I could get in the presentation showing what the precipitation has done over the last year or so, and is affecting the well recharge of this area. And I'll try to get those set back. We couldn't get in the presentation, but I'll just set it up right up here at the end, and you can take a look at it. And I'll stand there and explain it, but just to let you know that Montgomery County observation well, as of like today, it's the lowest it's been since 2016.
Okay, next question. The quarry is in the path of the underground water aquifers, with the water flowing towards Salford Township, with the quarry in the path of water flow towards Salford Township. Were any studies performed before quarry construction, during quarry construction, and currently?
As you saw in that topographic thing we saw, where the elevation of the quarry, you can actually see that the groundwater flows actually north and south. It doesn't go east to west. You can see all those regional divides as well. That's going to take water away, but the flow is not toward the quarry, toward the township. I'm sorry, I misspoke. So that's where the water is going, and they did this study before they have a permit. They have to do a study, and that's kind of where the model came from. Before they started, what they had to show, but they may affect the quarry.
Okay. We're going to talk about the radius of influence. We had a lot of questions regarding that. And the first question that came in, has there been anyone, even just one, outside the 2-mile line that the quarry, township, or anyone in relation to the quarry that has received assistance?
The department is unaware of anybody receiving assistance that far away. We just don't know if anybody has.
The next question, how is that a specific line 2 miles away from the quarry, that the imaginary line that the quarry came up with doesn't affect those outside the line, and it's the Lockatong Formation of the Rocks Fault, according to the DEP's 1930-something report?
Okay, so what I think is being talked about here is the zone of influence that we spent a slide on explaining. It's the concentric red lines in and around the quarry. And that zone of influence is based on observable hydrologic parameters that are plugged into this modeling software. And then the model is calibrated to match reality. So the modeler will see what outputs the model puts out, and then measure, plot it against, what was actually going on in the stream, what was actually going on in those wells at that time. And then, so once it's calibrated to match reality, the modeler will essentially build the quarry into the future at different depths and at different sizes, and then they do these internal error checks that are they're standardized ASTM standards for how much error is allowed within a groundwater model, and then once that model is, the modeler is satisfied with the results and that he or she has constructed a properly constructed model, they'll use those results to make these maps of the zone of influence or expected drawdown. And so it's not imaginary and it's not arbitrary, it's thoroughly considered by professionals.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to homeowner communications questions next. What are the combined results that have been given to the homeowners as to the cause of the individual wells going dry within 2-mile radius versus outside of the 2-mile radius? Okay,
so this is sort of similar as we were talking about. The standard we use for well investigations, it comes from the regs and the regulations in non-coal mining. the regulations come from 25 PA Code, Chapter 77, and the specific regulation is 77533, which talks about water replacement. And the verbiage in the regs, don't quote me on it, is have non-coal, if non-coal mining activities have affected public or private water supplies, the operator is obligated to replace it. So that's the standard we use. And so we investigate each complaint individually. You know, Mike's shown up at a bunch of people's houses and seen what's going on individually. And then, as we pointed out earlier, once we realized it's more than just one or two people, we've started to take this regional look at the whole thing. And so the final product that a complainant gets is a sealed report from us.
Okay, in recent weeks, we found that other townships are having residents with similar issues. Has anyone reached out to those township officials from our township? I think that might be a question for the township. Okay.
I talk regularly with the manager at West Rock Hill Township. I think the last time we spoke was maybe July-ish. And when I stopped in to see him, there were no reported well issues. There may be since then, but at that point there were not. And they have not reached out to us. No one has.
Okay, thank you. It was once mentioned that the DEP represents the quarry. At what point does that switch to representing the environment, not the individual?
The department represents the Commonwealth. We do not represent any one entity or business or anything like that. The mining program, which is the folks here before you, we're responsible for the permitting and enforcement of the non-coal mining regulations in the Commonwealth.
Okay, we're going to move on to some blasting questions next. Is blasting at the quarry monitored beyond what they document?
At this time, no, they are required to do seismic monitoring at the closest non-owned structure, and the particular displacement, spatial relationships between the blasting areas to and I mean by non-owned structure, is the homes around the quarry that are not owned by the quarry, okay? We don't want them monitoring their stuff. So the reason for that is energy dissipates with distance. So someone's not going to get a 0.4 or a 0.5 at the closest structure, and you're going to get a 6.0 600 feet further away. It just doesn't do that. It gets weaker the further it gets from the blast areas. Okay?
Okay. Can repeated blasting cause shift in underground plates and rock, especially when it gets deeper and wider?
No. Blasting only creates permanent displacement at the blast site. Beyond the blast site, there is no permanent displacement in geology.
Okay, thank you. We are now moving on to quarry operations questions. How much water is being pumped out of the quarry daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly?
The quarry's permitted to pump 500,000 gallons per day. However, when you look at the data, they actually only pump out 0.41 to 0.47 on average. So it kind of varies. We saw Mike's thing, but it doesn't even really get to 500,000 gallons per day. But it's less than that. 1,000,000 gallons per day. Thank you. I should have said that.
Okay. There's a video on the screen. That's the one we were trying to
There
show
we go.
earlier of what.
This is about what 500,000 gallons per day looks like.
So just take out the decimal and just turn it into 300,000 gallons or 400,000 gallons.
Yeah, it's like 410,000 gallons to 470,000 gallons per day.
All right. How much deeper is the quarry allowed to go?
The quarry is currently permitted to go to 305 feet mean sea level.
And how much deeper and wider has the quarry dug since 2001?
The quarry is 155 feet deeper and approximately 500 feet wider since 2001.
Okay, I have one more question, and then we'll open it up to the audience. What is the current depth of the quarry versus the average required depth of the new wells that people need to drill?
The quarry is actually, when they go out for a new well, they're actually targeting a depth 20 feet below the quarry floor. So the quarry floor is at 305. So when they're doing the new well, installing a new well, they're going down to 285 feet mean sea level.
Thank you. Okay. I'm now going to open up the floor for additional questions. Please line up behind the podium to ask your question. An appropriate DEP member or the Montgomery County staff will answer them. Please state your name and your street address and ask your question. If we run out of time, please submit your question by email to the resource account, and a staff member will provide you a response. If your question requires further explanation, that staff may need more time to prepare the appropriate answer. We will provide that question and answer in a follow-up email to the township. General reminders that need to be stated. While we understand this is a very emotional issue for many of you, I need to ask that you remain respectful to the panelists, to me, and fellow audience members. When you come to the mic, please limit yourself to one question and one clarifying question follow-up. If there's time, we'll invite those folks back up who still have questions and backup questions. I want to make sure that everybody has a relevant question that they're allowed to ask today. Again, please reserve general statements, concerns, or remarks that are not questions to the resource account.
How long are questions for?
For today, probably about an hour or so, maybe a little longer, if depending on how it goes. We want to make sure we get through as many as we can. Once we get through the audience questions, we'll open it up at the floor to the remaining questions received online, if they're available, and then the township, they will give us those questions a little later. So let's take your questions. Let me get you a microphone, and we'll get started.
Good afternoon. My name's John Baskin. I live at 124 Weber Road in Salford Township. I've lived there since 1971. I do know the depth of my well. I do know what the yield was at the time, and I know where my pump is hanging. But notwithstanding, people not too far from me have dry wells. First off, excellent presentation. Really thoroughly covered and well structured. But the questions, some of the questions that come up regarding the first presentation, regarding the Lakaton formation, you did not say where the depth of that formation is geologically in this township. Where is that formation? How far down does it go? Or where does it begin and how far does it go after that?
We'll have to actually, we can't give you a definite number now. We'll get back to it. The Lakaton and the Brunswick combined are approximately 10,000 feet thick.
Okay. The reason I ask that question is because you're punching wells into the ground and you're trying to reach a formation that's going to offer appropriate yield. We don't know what formation seems to be providing or contributing to dry wells, do we?
Well, when I was talking about the fractures in the rock, the Lakaton doesn't get, their fractures are very narrow in the rock. And so when the precipitation is coming down, it doesn't get a lot of water to it compared to the Brunswick. And the fractures in the Lakaton are further spaced apart just because the rock is so dense. It doesn't have a lot of fractures compared to the Brunswick. So the Brunswick, if you saw the one comparison had a bunch of fractures, the Brunswick's really not like that, but it has a tendency to have a lot more fractures together that you can get like a pocket of water to it.
Yeah, I think that what we're getting at here, and we don't have I don't think we have the information where your well may level be in terms of what formation when they drill it. We don't know that per se. And even though I gave you my depth, it doesn't mean I know what formation I'm in. That was probably my point. But the last question I have for you, and just the geologist, and I'm glad we have some great geologists here today, but it's a guessing game, I'm sure. We don't really know what goes on underground. We'd like to think we do, but we only probably come up with the best models and the best guess and come up with whatever data historically and otherwise that we have. So here's my basic question from you, and I've lived here since '71. I remember what the old timers used to tell me, and maybe they were right or maybe they were wrong. But does rainfall in this area actually contribute to help filling and recharging the aquifer?
Yes.
All right, because most of the people up here will tell you everything runs off the surface.
That is true. And you saw that, I'm going to let Mike finish, but you saw that in the map that he had earlier of the different counties.
Yeah, so the water will recharge to the ground. It's just that the rock is so tough. The reason it's a ridge, it's a tough rock. It's not going to erode. The weaker rocks at the valley, that's where the weaker rocks are. So the rocks that are up on a ridge are tough, resistant rocks, and it doesn't have a lot of chance even for the water to infiltrate them unless it gets those fractures. Does that answer your question?
Well, it's again, it's a guessing game. The old timers used to tell me, but we didn't get enough snow during the winters. We would not be able to have water percolate sufficiently through the soil and fill the aquifers that we draw from.
The snowpack is a factor, and
I don't think anybody mentioned that earlier.
No, we didn't, and that's a fair consideration. Slow soaking of snowmelt or that kind of precipitation will infiltrate better and recharge better than hard, flashy rains, which, I don't know where you live, but that seems to be the standard. I live in Lehigh County, and it's very rarely is it a nice soaking day of rain. It's these crazy storms that blow through. Most of it runs off, and that water doesn't recharge. So it's a mix. And Mike is right. The rock itself does not recharge well because it's not porous. It doesn't accept water. And the fractures where it could infiltrate into are few. Their aperture is very small, and they're widely spaced. So the opportunity is rare, or not rare, but less than in other places.
Just one comment from what I understand is other areas of the state of Pennsylvania probably help contribute to the recharge of this particular area where the rock formations may in fact be different and where their snowfall levels may have been higher. Yes?
Yeah, it's
No?
like a regional question.
It's a regional basin. One slide I didn't have up there just because of time constraints is we look at precipitation in relation to like stream flow. And what that is, that's looking at the overall basin, not just like Salford Township that's coming into the area. So we looked at that and see if it would match what precipitation does. To see if it's matching. Hey, we can say that hey, there's a lot of precipitation maybe coming down, but you look at the regional basin, there's not much water that's in the stream flows. So we do examine that.
My name is David Good. I'm at 369 Ridge Road. Mike doesn't like to be angled that way.
Oh, I'm sorry.
When we were going through the process of redrilling our well, I'd spoken with Tim Blum, and one of the comments that he made was that in watching the well depths, there seemed to be two valleys in the well depths. The one valley originated around the quarry, and the other valley seemed to be around North Dietz Mill Road. I was just wondering if you guys also tracked the well depths in that way, and if you knew if those depths were based off of the mean sea level, or if that was depths based off the wellhead. And I'm just wondering because, the peak he said was around 476, and that's about where the ridge is at its highest. You go downhill to Dietz and then uphill again. So if there's two bumps and that's based off the wellhead, that could be indicating impact from the quarry. So.
Yeah, we already get the well data, what we can find on PAGO, so we really don't know to say what the two dips, but we're looking at everything off of feet mean sea level. We'll go onto Google Earth and we'll see what the surface is. And we'll get the information on the well depth and even the water depth. And we'll take everything off of mean sea level and see what we get there. And the wells that were, say, like less than 100 feet deep, those are the ones that are having more of the problem with the wells. Wells that were deeper aren't having that much problem with the low yields right now. I don't know if that answers your question.
So you're not necessarily monitoring, like when someone needs a well replacement, you're not necessarily monitoring what their well depth is at and what their water depth is at that point?
It's exactly what we do. We say that, say your well is 100 feet deep and your water's at 50. So I'll look at what the surface elevation of where the property is. And I got a chart that says, okay, here's your well depth, here's where your water is. And it's kind of tough I know you're getting at, it's kind of tough to say that, where the pocket of water is, because we don't have that much data all around. The only time we get data, if you go to somebody's house and we get that information.
Right.
It's not readily available. Like, not all the houses have the data in the system, especially older wells aren't in there.
Would there be value in doing a survey like that of, anyone who's willing to have their well measured to do those measurements and see if that would give you a chart along that strata of rock that could potentially show you where those water lines are at?
Yeah, we'd have to get like a lot of data, and that's not really what we do for money, but as it comes in, we can accumulate. And that's one thing I really couldn't say. I did the chart, did the graph, what you're saying, of where the stuff is, but it's just insufficient data to like pinpoint something that, hey, there's two troughs here, like you were saying. There's
Right.
nothing we've seen like that yet. But as data comes in, we keep on adding to it.
That's fine. No, I didn't know it either. Hello, my name is John McMillan. I live at 13 Weber Road, and I don't have a question as much as to answer one. The question was, has there been anyone, even just one person, who was compensated for a well? And the answer to that is yes, I was. I'm outside of the 2-mile radius, and my neighbor behind me who lives on Ridge Road also had a well dug and paid for by the quarry. Thank you.
My name is Corey Stevens. I'm located on 460 Ridge Road. That's a tough one to follow because that's why we're all here. So my question is kind of going back to feeding off the first conversations we had, is that there is a lot of unknown here of what really happens underneath the surface of the ground. I was one of the first to actually have, and I think, to make the complaint to the DEP about what happened to my well. I was led to believe that, and it's in a report, that the tributaries, the little cracks and stuff like that had become clogged, and there wasn't able to put enough water back into my well. So, okay, I fought. I had many conversations, take time away from my work, and go from there. But then there was how many? 30, 40 other people, I think, that have actually had their wells gone dry, even though they said there's only been 18 permits. It's a bigger story than what's actually being led on. And I'm astounded about how many people actually have come out today to support this, whether your well has gone dry or very close to possible. We had a neighbor that had a newer house that their well was way deeper than ours. Well, it was only about a month or so ago that the three of them actually in that area went dry. So my question comes to the fact of one of our previous discussions we had on the phone when my well first went dry was, is it possible that the quarry could be responsible for the loss of the water table and stuff like that? This went round and round because you know how people will dance around that question, is it possible? I got Mike, and I believe it was you also, to admit that it was possible. There is not enough information to say it's not. So with that, everybody take your feelings and concerns and put that behind it and see what you have to say. Thank you.
Good afternoon, all. Thank you for the presentation. My name is Hal Sharmer, 1805 Ridge Road, West Rock Hill side. I had a couple questions about your modeling, because we are one of the test wells, and depending on where they blast in the sedimentary, actually metamorphosized rock, you can tell whether they're blasting on the back wall or the same wall. The amount of vibration you get varies very differently. If you are on the same piece of strata, you feel a really hard shake. Other times, you do not. My main question was, have any of your models taken into account the water levels and the loss when the Northeast Extension was cut through and many wells were lost back in the late 50s, early 60s? Have you guys ever considered the well levels over at the Gold Mine Quarry on Gold Mine Road and the history of that with going down 94 feet and getting out of the Hornfels layer? And when we talk about this is a Lockatong and Brunswick shale area, I understand that your models are based on Lockatong and Brunswick shale, but the quarry is not here mining Lockatong. They are mining Hornfels. They are mining they're mining the Lockatong that was baked by the igneous diabase that came in. That's why they are here. That's why we have a much more brittle rock. That's why they want this rock and not the rock someplace else. So I'm curious about you guys saying that this is Brunswick and it's Lockatong, and it's not. Anybody who's driven down Ingram's Hill comes to the bottom, you get down to the bottom of the baked area, and there's a big friggin' pothole at the bottom of Ingram's Hill every single year because there's a spring there. That happens to be the same level where the quarry, where the gold mine on Gold Mine Road finally dug out. They got out of the baked Hornfels and into the red Brunswick shale, and the quarry and the gold mine flooded. However, now the level in the gold mine has dropped quite a bit. So I am curious about that issue for how your modeling is done to figure this out. If you're using standard Lockatong and Brunswick numbers, when this is not Lockatong and Brunswick, this is Hornfels Argillite.
I'll start, you can finish. Okay. We don't do the modeling. So the H&K or any other operator hires an independent consultant to do the modeling. So I can share the groundwater model with you. It's public information. You could write your email down or something, and we'll share it with you. So I can't give you the specifics because I didn't model it, and I don't know what numbers for hydraulic conductivity and whatnot were used for that. To your statement about it not being Lockatong, Lockatong is the rock type is Hornfels. So the Hornfels is baked, indurated mudstone that lacks the fissile parting of shale. Yep. And that is the main thing they're mining there. You're right. So it is, Lockatong is just the name of this body of Hornfels, and Brunswick is the name of this body of red shale.
Yeah, there's actually Landis Ridge, according to all the geology texts. It's actually called it's actually Tylersport member of the Newark Basin, but.
Well, they changed the Passaic. We want to get really specific. So the older texts from 77 or 71 and all that, it was all called Brunswick. They're always, the Pennsylvania survey and every other geologic survey is always refining the stratigraphy. So what it's...
Olson et al. Out of Rutgers identify it as the Tylersport member, so.
That's, okay.
So
member is just a subset of a formation,
It's a very specific rock. It's really black, dark shale. It's highly enriched in rare earth elements, which is why everybody has water that is so hard that you have a drip in your pipes and it will self-seal in about 2 weeks.
Okay. Did you have other questions? I forget, I'm sorry.
Well, I did have one question, which is, when you guys had the information for the amount of pumping from the quarry, the amount of pumping seemed to stay relatively stable even though the rainfall was going rather up and down. Do you have a moving average on, next time you put that together, could you put a moving average, because we have that information, and if they're putting out 400,000?
About 410 to 470 the recent stuff I examined with the data.
Okay,
It
because I
was
know-
less than 500,000, less than 500,000 gallons.
Yep, because I know that gets dumped, because that's going out into the area. There's actually a big, beautiful meadow with ospreys back behind the quarry. It comes out, which is unofficially known as Bill Leslie's Run. Bill Leslie was a sax musician, lives on Thousand Acre Road right by the bridge, lived on Thousand Acre Road right by the bridge. But everybody knows the area, everybody knows that that stream runs continuously. So we're talking about 400,000 gallons per day being pulled out, and that doesn't have an effect, is the conclusion. Northeast, I think. Well, everyone,
Yeah, when I showed the tributaries up there, those are unnamed tributaries.
that goes northeast, it goes past Leslie's, Thelma's, and then up into Ridge,
Yeah.
and then,
Yeah. It'll go northeast toward the court, yeah.
So I think the,
Where are we all located? Is that going away from us?
so one thing, we're going to talk, we're answering your question, which I think was, what are the effects of pumping 400,000 gallons of water a day? Is that the question?
yes.
Right. So the effect of that is lowered groundwater elevations around the quarry. And that is allowed by the Pennsylvania regulations for non-coal mining. What is required is the quarry to monitor that and us to review it and make sure that it is not causing pollution, all right? And so lowering the groundwater elevations itself is not causing pollution. There's a point where there could be a point where the department says enough's enough, whether it be an effect on the stream or whether it be an effect on wells or some other resource, right? So the effect, what Mike pointed out, and I'm going to hand it to you for like that Lockatong slide, how a drawdown doesn't affect, yeah, so he's going to answer the question about the drawdown on the stream.
So this is the current impression of the Lockatong. You're saying it's not extended.
Mike?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm tired. That's a Lockatong formation. For wells pumped in the Lockatong, it doesn't have an extensive cone of depression. It's kind of localized to the well. It's not going to like extend out this way, toward the stream. It's where it's at, just based on how dense the rock is, and it doesn't have many fractures to it. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Well, that was part of my question is, considering that there's an actual gold mine on Gold Mine Road, which indicates that the rock is highly fractured, did you take that into account, figuring that there are no fractures when you've got a gold mine, which indicates that the rock is highly fractured? That's why you have quartz and gold deposits in the area.
So I didn't look at the data of the gold mine. I didn't find that in the
Okay,
research.
thank you.
Yeah.
My name is Joanne Hartshorn. I'm from Dietz Mill Road. And my question's for you, Mike, so you can take the mic back.
Okay.
Okay. My question is, when we were looking at photo number 3,
Photo 3, okay, with the quarry floor.
correct?
Yeah.
You stated that the quarry had opened a new mining area in 2022. Is that correct?
They got down to, they started working on to get that deep, to the 305, where I'm showing in that slide, they're down to
Okay. Would you
305.
would you please use the mic?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Let me go out and look at the picture, too. I apologize. So this is the current floor of the quarry at
Right.
305.
Okay.
They started working on to get to that deep in late 2022. So to get to this level, say they were at this high wall here, they need to get down to that level. They started working on that in late 2022.
Late 2022?
Yes.
And you also mentioned that the problem with the wells that we've been having in the last 2 years, I think, has increased like 18, it's like, it accounts for 18% of all the dry wells, or problem wells, in I think you said the North Penn area. I'm not sure what area you're referring to.
Yeah, that,
Yeah, what I had said that there were.
I kind of want you to confirm that, that's all.
Oh, yeah, I believe we had 24 wells in the past 2 years, dry wells in the county, and 18 of them were just in Salford
And
Township.
that was the entire county of
That-
Montgomery County.
Correct, correct.
Okay.
In the past.
So, and that was
Yeah.
within the last 2
Did I
years.
say that right? Am I saying that right? Yeah, 10 years, but I'm sorry, but yeah, in 10, over 10 years, there were 125 dry wells. That's where you got that percentage, and I said about 15% were dry wells in Salford Township.
In Salford Township.
Correct,
Okay.
yeah.
So I'm going to go back to my question to
And-
Mike.
and then, yeah,
Mike,
and then
if you could
18
tell
wells.
me,
Okay.
if something has changed in the last 2 years within the mining region, actually within, this Naysville quarry, that would account for all of a sudden in the last 2 years, other than obviously the drought, has something happened in that quarry that would account for what we're seeing now? Can you answer that?
well, the only thing you can see in the quarries or mine is that groundwater is going to seep in where you see it right now.
You'll have to talk up, please.
I'm sorry. The groundwater coming into the quarry hasn't changed. It's just still going to seep in there. There's nothing that's going on other than taking the rock out of there. Nothing's changed in their operations. Nothing has gone outside what they normally would do.
Outside the norm?
Outside the norm, yeah, there's blasting the rock, taking it out and going from there.
No depth of their wells have been sunk deeper or changed in any way?
Excuse me, the wells that they monitor?
Right.
No, those wells have stayed the same. The wells
Nothing's
that they use
changed.
for that model, for the monitor. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll let you handle that then, or not. Some of them will. The ones that are closest to the quarry will. The ones that are furthest away won't.
Okay. Okay.
Hi, my name's Kim Walther Moyer, 192 Clump Road. I have a question based on your answer. So you said in the 10 years, 15% of the wells that went dry were in our township.
Correct, yes.
Okay. Was there any, and that was all of Montgomery County?
Yes, correct.
Was there any other area that had that big of a concentration? Do you
To
know what
my-
I'm saying?
No, I agree, or I see what you're saying, and the answer is no, not to my knowledge. I mean, there are little areas where there might be one or two wells, but nothing like this.
Okay, so then this is obviously an issue.
Correct. I mean, we would see it as such, yes.
Okay.
As do you.
Okay, I just wanted to, I wasn't sure if it was something that could be explained any other way or not.
Right,
So,
no,
okay,
correct.
awesome.
We felt that it was unusual, and you all do as well. But, yeah, there's, as they say, there's many factors that could be playing into this, but the precipitation, that sort of thing, but
Right, but
obviously.
that would affect kind of everywhere.
Correct. Although, yeah, precipitation can change a little bit from, in different areas, but in
Right.
general, yeah, it would affect everybody
In
the same.
Montgomery County.
Montgomery
It's like
County.
we're not that different.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
okay, thank you.
Sure.
Kyle, you better stay up there. This probably is going to be directed to you.
It's okay.
I identified myself to you earlier, but I'll
Yes.
repeat my name again. It's John Baskin, a former SEO officer. So I got a question that is sort of related. Everybody likes their little piece of heaven up here in this area. This township is known for its beauty and its area and so forth, and everybody like to keep it that way. But of course, when you want to put a house up, you have to get permits. I didn't need a permit for a well, but I probably would now. But I certainly needed a permit for a sewage system. And there are cases up here where some things don't perk. And you may not have available land to look for the location of a system or even a replacement system if your system fails. But the way the trend is and the way the slide showed, and my neighbor asked this question on a tablet for me, number of people who are punching holes in the ground to put wells in, Do we have an obligation as a township or a county health department to notify a permittee who is building a house that the neighbor's house next door, their well went dry? And maybe you don't want to buy that lot, or maybe you don't want to build that house because you're not going to have water. So what might be the trend of this county and this health department notifying a resident who wants to build a house, or not a resident, but somebody who buys a piece of property? What's our obligation here?
Well, I mean, that's a really good question. I mean, it's not something that we've offered in other words, when property is purchased and homes are built and a well permit comes to us, I don't know, we kind of just address the permit process specifically. And sort of, yeah, let the buyer beware. And I could the buyer inquire at the township office? Maybe. We don't try not to get involved too much between a buyer and seller of property. We keep to what were the parameters of our purview, I guess the word is. But I understand it's a good thought, but we try to keep our nose out of it a little bit.
Again, my name is Corey. Back up again, sorry, Pat. My question is actually to everybody here, from the township to the DEP to public health, everything like that, is when does it get alarming that this many people, with your stats that you gave, that their wells have gone dry all at one time? It's been 3 years since it started, and it seems like no one's prepared to give an answer or a fix or, answer what is actually causing it. Because I think, like I said before, the answer that was given to me of my cause is probably not the right answer. So when is it going to be re-looked into? When is it going to be figured out? DEP is, environmental protection. When is this drought of water underneath our ground going to start affecting everything else? And that's just what I want to know. And who's gonna stand up to come to a conclusion? If it's not the quarry, then what is it? Who is going to help us figure this out?
So I'll take a stab at answering your question, and it's a bigger question than our mining office. That it's the purview of our mining office, and what you're seeing here, I think, is that Montgomery County is siloed up in its purview. The mining program is siloed up in its program, where we call balls and strikes on individual well complaints. You either, the quarry's responsible and they have to replace a well, or we've determined the quarry's not responsible and they don't have to replace a well. You and the gentleman before brought up a good question about a regional resource and a regional look at things. And I'm writing these things down. I'll talk with our bureau director and maybe somebody from the Southeast region about who would be the best person or group to look into that. I don't want to give you a platitude that we're concerned. Obviously, I have a well too, and I think about how I would want to be treated in the situation when we do these well investigations. I think it's safe to say, and our office is sort of down in the trenches, and we look at each. We don't have the opportunity in the way our program works to step up and look at the 10,000 or 30,000 foot view as much as we like. And so all I can tell you is that I'll do that now. And if perhaps we should have done it a year or two ago, but we'll look into that now. We'll start it now.
Afternoon again. Mr. Shermer, a quick softball question for you guys. Could you make sure to put up the PowerPoint in pretty high resolution, because everybody's going to want to look at where things are on find their house, find their neighbor, find the lines?
Yeah, we're going to do that. And I just want to let you know, everything that I had on the slides there, it's referenced, what documents I looked at and where I got the data from. So you can go back online yourself and we reference it so you guys can look up exactly, hey, here's the document he used for that slide. Here's where he got the data to come up with that. So,
Okay, just checking, because
No.
I know about half the time I hate our township engineers because they send us 26 megabyte PDF files, which versus some which are like 200 by 200 DPI, you can't see anything. So I'm just, could you guys find something which we can actually reasonably read? Thank you.
Hi, Allison Ruth. I'm on Ridge Road, Salford Township. I guess I have a couple questions now because one came up while I was in line. You're saying that you individually look at everyone's wells, which I understand. But are you saying when you're saying the quarry's impact, you're not taking into account all of these individual wells that have issues outside of the zone of influence?
I'm thinking about how to answer your question. So Mike has done all of the well investigations for the last 2 or 3 years. And the benefit of having one person do it is that, you know, he has the ability to sort of keep an eye on, you know, maybe I think the zone of influence map isn't quite right. And that's something he considers. Maybe we're not seeing the groundwater elevations corresponding to the information the quarry's given us. So there's all these sort of internal checks that he does when he's doing these well complaints, and I'm the one who reviews, I think, all of his well complaints. And he and I have some animated discussions sometimes about, and I purposefully challenge him to, you know, are you wrong? You know, try to find ways to make him wrong, right? And so the answer is we do consider the quarry zone of influence, and we do consider the validity of the model every time. And, you know, there have been times when in our review of well complaints where I'll remember something that he wrote for another resident, and I'll be like, hey, you, for the Jones well, didn't we do this, or didn't you say that? And he gives me a reason why the Smith well is different, and I'm like, okay. So yes, we do consider the totality of, if it was one well complaint, there wouldn't be much to look at. If there was 2 well complaints in 5 years, there wouldn't be much to look at. Now that there's, whatever it is, 30 well complaints in 3 years, there's more to look at, and we do consider that. I don't have a good answer for the gentleman earlier about regional resources being deployed to remedy the problem, but each well complaint is looked at both individually and with respect to all the ones he's looked at before, and with respect to the data the quarry is supplying.
Okay. And if I may, so looking at the maps, the very first page, that zone of influence, that was done from what study? What year was that study?
2014 or 15.
So I thought
14.
the one on the second page, I know this was redone for 2023, but wasn't that relying on the 2014 model?
I don't have the paper map that you have, so I'm sorry. I mean, I might, but I'm not sure which one it is. Okay, give me a second.
The township provided maps of the zone of influence from 2001 to 2023.
Okay, so, all right. So this map is 2 lines that are drawn 1,000 feet and 1,500 feet from the perimeter of the quarry. And it's common, and Barb would probably be the best person to know this, H&K and other operators will enter in agreements with townships to say, hey, if we have a well complaint within 1,000 feet of a quarry or 1,500 feet of a quarry, these are the things H&K will do, and it's an agreement with between Salford Township or whatever township, West Rock Hill Township, most likely because it was permitted in their township, that we'll fix these wells. No questions asked. That could be one thing they've engaged in. Okay, and that is enforced by that township. The department only enforces that reg I mentioned to you. So if, they wanted to fight with that township, we're not gonna get involved in that. If it comes to us and say, hey, we think there was a well that was affected inside that, we can make them do it. We don't care what anybody's agreement is or not, right? So this is just a drawing of these these lines. It's not a study. It's just a protractor around that area. This other one is a modification of the slide we showed earlier with the numerous red concentric lines in and around the quarry, or concentric ovals around the quarry. This is the biggest line. So this one is the 2014 study that we're using, and
Right, so I guess that's and I want to thank you for the clarification, but so what we're saying is that the people outside of that zone who have recently been impacted, we're relying on a study from 10 years ago. The model from 10 years ago.
That is true, yeah. And so the answer to that, though, is that there's not been large-scale changes in pumping, and the properties of the rocks haven't changed in 10 years. So maybe it's time to get a new model that partly because of it's 10 years old, but also because there are these other issues. And so, but we don't have any reason to believe that it's grossly invalid. And so Mike does more than just look and see, are you inside or outside that line? And he and I have discussions, and I give him a lot of comments about his reports. Okay, but, okay. All right, then I misspoke then. I guess this is a new map from 2023 that, because it just looks a lot like that old, I guess I don't know what this map is specifically, so I should withdraw a little bit about what I said. But the point about what we, earlier with those red, is we look more than just, are you inside or outside? Because there's more to being a geologist than looking on a map and saying, are you a dot inside the line or a dot outside the line, right?
Certainly, and I can understand that, but to come in and say, well, this area has been developed, which certainly it has in the last several decades, but had H&K not made a quarry there, we wouldn't be losing 500,000 gallons of water every day. So I think, my question is, shouldn't we be there's got to be a ripple effect. Shouldn't we have some kind of updated data considering what's happened the last couple of years? And shouldn't it be done by the state rather than by a company that's paid by $1 billion company for this, to get this thing that you all rely on? Shouldn't the state be doing it?
The regulatory scheme is set up that and this is pretty standard, the company, the permittee or the applicant provides the information. We have geologists, me, Mike, Tiffany, and Jim. We review it, we ask them questions, we decide if it is legitimate or not, and we are the third-party review of that work. Frankly, we don't have the resources to hire a modeler and do all the work ourselves. I mean, if we did, that'd be a different story, but that's not in our purview to do.
Is it true that they did a new model that has been presented to that you folks and you haven't had a chance to review it yet? And if that is so, when will it be reviewed?
They did submit something, but I haven't accepted it yet because we need fees. They're missing. So just to be clear, there's actually 2 permits here, and they messed up their fees. They owe me a check. So we can't accept anything without the fees.
So when is this just a permit that's being reviewed to dig deeper, or is this something that's taking into account?
This is just an update to the groundwater model. So
Okay.
it's just sitting, I'm just waiting for H&K Naisville Materials, H&K, to get me the check. I need additional copies. It's just more paperwork, but it's updating the groundwater model from the groundwater model that was up on the screen was 2015, approved in 2015, it says 2014. The new model is 2023, 2024 information.
Okay. And lastly, I won't take up any more time. I do want to thank everyone for being here, though I do want to express frustration. I know some of my neighbors have been dealing with this from years ago. We're late to the game. It just happened this summer. But many more people would have been here had it not been in the middle of a workday in the week. I'm sure all of you folks are salaried employees. Not everyone is. Some people had to take off days from work to be here. A lot of people who are able to be here are retired. Not to mention this was held on Rosh Hashanah, so anyone of the Jewish faith couldn't be here today. And schools were also closed as a result of that. So anyone who has kids had to get childcare to be here. So I just want to make all of you aware of those frustrations, because I'm sure none of that was done intentionally, but it's not well received.
Understood. We did not select the time or the date. Salford Township did. We pitched dates, you finalized it. We pitched some dates to you and you finalized it. And you finalized the time.
Again, this is, name's David Good from 369 Ridge Road. I appreciate all of you being here and being in the hot seat. My history is in auditing, so I understand some of the third-party review and whatnot paid by the person that you're reviewing. Just kind of want to ask you from a 30,000-foot viewpoint, some of the first slides were showing the strata of rock that the quarry is in and all of the wells. I mean, there's a very distinct line that follows that same rock strata. Do you know what the surface area of the quarry is? What I saw online said about 5 acres, but I wasn't sure if that was pre-expansion or post-expansion.
I don't know the surface area. I mean, we could get the permit acreage for you pretty easily, but sitting here today, I can't tell you it's 77 acres or whatever. I can't tell you that without looking into that.
So objectively, from what I found in the 21 application, they were applying to go from 5 acres to 10 acres. And I don't know if that's accurate or not, but that's just what I have at the moment. So I'm just going to throw out some 30,000-foot data. 50 inches of rainfall, which would be high for our area, over a 10-acre area, would be 12 million, somewhere around 12 million, 13.5 million gallons of water. If we're saying that on a low level, they pumped 410,000 gallons of water, then on a 50-inch rainfall year, within 33 days, they would have pumped off all of the water from that rainfall. There's another 320 days in the year. Where is that water coming from? It has to be coming from the aquifer. So, I'm just from a logical side of things, and I know I don't understand the geology side. I'm not even going to profess to understand that side of it. But from the maps that I'm seeing and where the wells are at, from a high level, just base logic perspective, that's why we're here. Because if we said, okay, it makes sense because of the drought, or it makes sense because of this, that, or the other, it is what it is, wells go dry. But just looking at a high-level view of the data, there's only one factor that really plays into all of this, and they're pumping out 320 days a year that's not coming from rainfall, just for what it's worth. I'm not necessarily looking for a response.
I'll think about, I think I understand your point.
Hello, my name is Bill Knowles, 6 Augustine Road, Sellersville. I live in West Rock Hill Township. I believe earlier somebody said that West Rock Hill Township has not reported any well issues?
So we have had well complaints and well losses in West Rock Hill Township. I think the question was between sort of township supervisor level, have they had these discussions? So we have, I know Mike has investigated well complaints in West Rock Hill Township. So this focus of these slides in this meeting is Salford Township because it was we were requested to be here by Salford Township. So we're aware of West Rock Hill, but we intentionally focused on Salford.
Do you know how many? What a percentage in West Rock Hill?
Shoot from the hip,
I think we had 5 from West Rock Hill, off the top of my head, well
So-
complaints.
What makes it an official complaint? Like my well has run dry several times. The yield is just way down from what it used to be. I never got a permit to get a new well. There's talk of public water coming through, so I want to kind of limp along with my well as long as possible, if I can.
What we consider an official complaint is when somebody contacts our office and says, I want to file a complaint for whatever reason. That's logged into a tracking system, and it's assigned to someone to investigate, whether it's a geologist or the inspector, depending on the type of the complaint. So if you've experienced well losses and haven't reported that to us, we would not know, and the number would be underreported in that case. I'm sure it's underreported because I'm sure there have been losses that we don't know about, but we can only talk about what we know about. So if you want to call that number that's on the slide, call the number, or send an email, or however you want to get it to us. We'll take your complaint and investigate.
Okay. I was told by somebody from the township building that there are a significant amount of wells that have being affected. I know somebody right near Fasagio's put a 500-foot well in, so something's going on.
Do we have the help specifically for South?
Just the recent one was 33.
Okay, I think Mike is saying it's been
38 from South, and say 5 from West Rock. The last 33.
So to be clear, all we can do, but he's not in Bucks County. He doesn't report so any Bucks County numbers, which is West Rock.
Yeah, he said 18.
I understand. So first off, this gentleman has the floor, and we're gonna, keep it to that. But again, we only can work with the numbers that are reported to us. So I would encourage you to file a complaint or let somebody know.
I will. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Emily. I live on Ridge Road. Few things. So Allison and I started a Facebook group for Salford Township. We have 88 members in the Salford Township well dry issues. With those 88 members, 52 of them had a dry well, and 12 of them reported to the DEP. So huge, drastic, numbers. And if you can imagine people that don't have Facebook, people that aren't on this group, I just wanted to make that clear that Department of Health, our state representative, I would like to know where our state representative stands, where, I'm not sure, are you part of the senator? Yeah. Thank you.
I'm state representative for this area, and in the redistricting 2 years ago, I got Salford into my district. And the first time I was aware of this was in November of 2023, when Barbara Lynch had invited me to come down because these same people from DEP were here, and they gave a presentation, but there was only myself and Barbara and maybe another supervisor, I think. And I don't know if Senator Collette sent anyone to that meeting, but she was not there herself. But anyway, when you talk about being alarmed, I was extremely alarmed at that point. And I had asked them, could they come back and talk to the residents? And so it took me this long, many requests, to get them to schedule a meeting. But it is alarming because in my district, I cover 3 counties. And I've only ever heard of one other well going dry and that's up in Coopersburg in Lehigh County. Now, there may be others, but that's the only one that reported anything to my office. But I have been in contact with Barbara, and I do find this very alarming. And I can't tell DEP what to do. They're under Governor Shapiro. I can't make a law about anything about this, but I find it extremely upsetting that my constituents do not have water. So I'll do whatever I can just to bring attention, because that's all that I can do as state representative. But I'm very sorry that this is happening, and I don't know the reason for it, but there would be possibly a way somehow to bring municipal water in if the township would decide to do that. But, people love their well water. I had a well in South Whitehall Township that was crisp and clear and fresh, but when I lived there, they forced us to tie in to that township water. So I don't know what your township will decide. That will be up to the residents. But I am very concerned about this. Thank you.
Would you like to speak, sir? I don't know if you have anything else you'd like to add.
Yep, so my name's Kyle Melander. I'm here on behalf of the congressman. So we just found out about the meeting, I believe, last week, got the invite. So unfortunately, the congressman was unable to attend today. Nonetheless, I'm the congressman's district director, so I manage his district operation. On top of that, before I was his district director, I did a lot of the environmental policy in the office as well. So I do have a background as it relates to quarries. We have the Rock Hill Quarry as well in our district, and various other water issues throughout our district as well. But nonetheless, just like Representative McKenzie, this is new to our district as well. So we started representing this township just about a year ago. We just found out about this issue about a year ago as well. So we are just learning right now. So, I mean, a lot of the stuff I learned today, a lot of the stuff here presented today, I just learned for the first time. And one of the biggest things, my takeaway is, what can we do to remedy this? And that's, I believe, a conversation that we should have at all levels. From the congressman's perspective, we do not have direct jurisdiction over the DEP. Those are for the state representatives and, as referenced, Governor Shapiro as well. However, what we do have jurisdiction over is the EPA. That's their federal counterpart, obviously. So nonetheless, I mean, my job here is to figure out the problems and work with all the parties involved, the DEP, EPA, and the township, to see what the remedy is. And I believe those are the conversations that we're going to be having in the coming days, whether it's a congressional direct spending, an earmark that is, various other funding opportunities. So we look forward to having those conversations.
Well, I also, appreciate you mentioning about laying public water. With that, a lot of the times it comes back to the resident's pocket, having to pay for hookup to each line. Everyone's already out $10,000, $20,000 per well. Some of them are dry more than once. So would it be a possibility if H&K would maybe help foot the bill instead of paying for more wells that are continuing to go dry? With that, I wanted to just piggyback on the previous conversation when the question was asked, within a 2-mile radius, Naysville Quarry is covering those homes that have gone dry. Anything outside that 2-mile radius, a home directly right outside of that 2-mile radius, 2.1 miles, 2.2, 2.4 miles, is not covered. All of a sudden, it's the Lockatong Formation. It's the Brunswick Formation's fault. But anybody within that zone of influence, it's Naysville Quarry. It just doesn't make sense. It's apples to oranges. And I don't understand why H&K is not here to defend themselves. It's very frustrating.
I just wanted to add something. And again, the state Senate and the state House have nothing to do with anything that DEP says or does, and we can't really get involved with making H&K do anything either. We're legislators, so we make just general laws for the Commonwealth. But there is something called PennVest, and that is a grant program. Now, when I first learned about this, I thought surely there might be some kind of grant process where individuals could get money to do their wells, but there was nothing set up for individuals. But there is something called PennVest, which is a bigger fund for bringing municipal water. But your township would have to make an arrangement with a different township, a neighboring township, to tie into that. And then the state could possibly, if you make the application, you could probably get state funds to make that more affordable. But I don't know the ins and outs of that. I've never had anyone else experience this. But I do know that PennVest is something that your township could look into for you.
One last question, and then I'll let everyone else speak. So when you mentioned that the quarry hasn't paid a fee, and
It's an application fee, not
Right.
any kind of mining.
right, so they haven't paid the application fee, but they submitted a document for you all to review, correct?
If they don't pay the fee, I'm going to return it to them because we can't accept it without the fee. Oh, I'm sorry. I need the fee in order to accept it. So I do have it sitting there. I've talked to H&K. It's the corporate structure of them getting the check signed and getting some additional copies, and then it will be accepted for review.
How long have you been holding on to that application? How long has it that they
Probably
haven't been
been
paid?
a week or so.
Okay, so they're still currently pumping water as we speak right now out of the quarry? While
Yes.
that application is still sitting there for you to review to see whether or not the zone of influence is changing, whether or not they're following everything they need to follow? Is that correct?
Yes, they're still pumping. Yes, they do have an existing permit to pump. They have an MPDS permit for pumping. It's still valid.
Hi, Barb from Salford Township. I do have a couple of questions, but comments first. We did not have the opportunity at the beginning of the meeting to say anything, so I would like to, on behalf of the rest of my board, thank Jim Myers, who's on the phone. He's one of the supervisors. He's on vacation, and he's calling in. We have our township solicitor, Steve Imms, with us. We have our zoning officer, Kirk Klingerman. We have our office staff here, too. Everybody worked behind the scenes hard to make this happen. I would like to also acknowledge and let Representative McKenzie know how much I appreciate your interest in this. I honestly believe if it weren't for your assistance, this meeting would still be being talked about. So I really appreciate it. And also to Kyle, thank you for representing Brian Fitzpatrick. The backstory to that was I texted him and said, we have an issue going on, would really love for you to be involved. He answered me back in 2 minutes and said, we're on it, tell us when the meeting is, we'll be there. So again, great appreciation, thank you for that. I think on to my questions. I would like some clarification on the whole impact, the zone of impact. I call it zone of impact, not area of influence, because area of influence sounds so nice. So is it true that when H&K would apply for a permit to dig, that is when the zone of influence, the impact zone, is reviewed? Is there anything else that triggers a review of that?
When the quarry applied in 1989, there was not a zone of influence study performed at that time. There's information in the permit regarding and acknowledging the low-yielding wells of the Locktown Formation, and it's all throughout there. And so there was not a groundwater model, which is how you get your zone of influence or area of impact, whatever you want to call it, done at that time. So in response to problems that H&K or that the department observed and was reported to us, they were required to perform it then. And groundwater modeling was not very common back in 1989. I'm sure there was ability to do it, but it was not very widespread. Any new quarry or any revision of an existing quarry that would be a lateral expansion or a vertical depth increase would require a groundwater model today.
Is that the only thing that triggers a review and a potential change of the impact zone?
Not necessarily, like we said, in response to problems in 2014, excuse me, we asked for that, so there wasn't one then.
Yeah, so specifically on the 2014 issue, that was one well. How did one well trigger a review and all these wells aren't triggering it?
I don't know, I didn't work on it then, so I don't know what the specifics of that was about.
It was in documentation provided by DEP, I think by you, Mike.
Yeah, I'm aware of it, but I don't know the backstory
I don't
that
understand the
got there.
rationale of one well triggers a re-review, but all these don't. I don't understand that.
I answered that earlier when I said we compare it to the wells that Mike investigates and takes the elevations of. We evaluate that all the time with every one of these. So H&K has submitted a new one for us to look at and review and decide if it's acceptable or not. And so.
So it is possible that that submission that Tiffany's waiting for, the administrative stuff, it is possible that the review of that could change the impact zone, is that correct?
It's possible. I would.
And what made them decide it's time to do a new model?
So, as is pretty common, it's not just H&K, a lot of the operators, sometimes people just call the company and they go out and they fix it, and we don't ever hear about it. Or they call a company and they don't fix it.
But what made them say,
I'm
I
about
think
to
we'll
tell
do a
you.
new, okay.
I'm about to tell you. So H&K has probably investigated, I know H&K has investigated more well complaints than we have, because we got a list, and I think we shared it with you. We've got about, call it 30, 33 complaints. I think they have 50 or 60 different ones listed, something like that. So they have a lot more information now, which I think is what's prompted them to say, we have enough information to recalibrate our groundwater model, and they're going to do it. And so is that fair?
With regard to a comment or a question raised earlier concerning H&K attendance, I would just like to clarify for our residents here, H&K was invited to this meeting. They were invited on September 5th. They declined yesterday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. They said that they felt that their presence could potentially cause disruption at the meeting, and they wanted DEP to have full control of the meeting. So just in the interest of transparency, I did want to share that.
We invited them as well.
Okay, thanks. And lastly, with regard to the timing of the meeting, we were provided a time slot between 10 and 2 to do the meeting on 2 different days. So I picked the latest time that I could, 2 o'clock. Maybe I should have picked 10, I don't know. But we tried to get it as late in the day as possible.
Okay, before we get to your question, because I know you had a couple, there's a person on the line that would like to also submit their question.
Do you want to do it? Thank you.
Why the website? What area? Oh, sorry.
Why the website? What area will be covered?
Why the website? What area, if any, will be covered outside the impact zone, and why the website posted incorrect information? While addressing this, keep in mind that a previous questioner confirmed that several people outside of the zone have been covered.
No, it's our website. Oh. This gentleman is Mr. Johnson from Badman Road, and I think he's referencing the 6,000 feet that I have on the township website. I can't for the life of me remember where I got that from. I do know that it did say 1,000 feet before. So whatever I updated a month ago, I saw 6,000 feet somewhere. I don't have it in front of me right now where I got it from, but I didn't pull it out of the sky. So do you have anything that can answer his question about that? Because I know that H&K is responsible inside the impact zone. So I may have to update the website, but I don't know where I got that 6,000 feet from. So any information you can give us might help this gentleman.
I also do not know where you got how the 6,000 foot was derived. As I pointed out earlier on one of the maps, there is an agreement, presumably, I don't know if it exists or not, but there's these 1,000 and 1,500 foot concentric circles drawn around the quarry. That could be the genesis of the 1,000 foot. I don't know. The zone of influence extends in one direction about 6,000 feet. But the zone of influence is not a perfect circle. It's very oval. It's very asymmetric, and that's a function of the hydrologic properties of the rock. So it's not, I'm going to be clear, it's not accurate to say everything inside 6,000 feet will be replaced by the quarry, because north to south, that 6,000 feet is not the same as east to west.
Okay, we're gonna take one last question, and we are at time. And then if anybody else has any additional questions, our resource account will be listed up there, and please feel free to send any other additional questions, concerns, complaints, anything to the resource account listed on the screen.
Actually, I just had a quick question or clarification, unfortunately just skipped off of it. What are the gradations on that zone of influence? Is that 5 feet, 10 feet, 20 feet?
Each line is 10 feet, and the maximum line is 10 feet of drawdown.
Okay, thank you.
We can take one more. Yeah, let's just if it's okay.
Thank you. My name is Tammy Clemens, and my mom lives on Waits Mill Road, and I'm helping to represent her. They weren't sure if they could make the meeting, but they have, but I still have some questions dealing with it. One is, I have spoken to 14 of my mom's neighbors. I individually went and talked to them on Waits Mill Road within the last couple of days, between Ridge Road and Clump Road. All 14 houses have had an issue where they've either had their well pumps completely go and their wells are dry, or their well pumps, as I said, they're also failing because they're burning out. So what they do is they recycle because they're trying to pull up the water, bring them back down, come back up, and it's burning them out. So anybody that has had that done, they're either being told where they have to use Blum, which is H&K is telling them they can only use Blum to be reimbursed or being used in these homes to be if your well is dry, use Blum. If you want to be reimbursed for your well pumps, you need to call Blum. I know that my mom has used somebody else, and I know one of the other neighbors has used somebody else. And I don't know if they're going to be able to be reimbursed, but this is very important because just a well pump is $3,000. So I don't understand why they're being told that they have to use Blum, and that would be considered a monopoly, where they're not allowed to use other companies. So is H&K paying these people a lot of money or less, so they don't have to be held accountable for this? I mean, that is a question for anybody.
I don't know the financial arrangement between HK and Blum. What we, the department, will enforce is a requirement to restore water supplies for those that we have determined to be impacted or affected by non-coal mining activities. So if one of these folks comes to us and says we've got a problem and we determine that H&K is responsible, what we'll do is say, H&K, you must make them whole. And how that comes to be, we don't get too involved in. And if a person has, I investigated 2 well complaints on Whites Mill Road 10+ years ago, and they had dug the holes, had drilled the wells, and then called us, and H&K wrote them a check afterwards. Now, that's one route. So they're not required by law or by anything we would say to use Blum. And I don't know that, I need more information, but there's not a requirement for that, is all I can tell you.
Because as I said, I know that the people that I've talked to, they used other companies and now they need to be reimbursed. And they're either not yet or they have been whole because they also knew that they were in the impact. My mom and several of the other neighbors did not know that they were in the impact zone. And I don't know why that they weren't told that they were in the impact zone, because my mom did call the township the other day and was told that she was not in the impact zone. But now we do come to find out that she is, and she can get her well pump replaced or reimbursed for. But as I said, out of those 14 houses, they've all had an issue. Either their well has been dried or they have the well pumps done.
So again, if you're unsatisfied with, you're welcome to call H&K and try to just handle it as one private person to one private entity. You're under no obligation to contact us, right? So if they've taken that approach and they're unsatisfied, you are welcome to call and give us that information. And if we deem it appropriate to say, hey, H&K, you've affected this person, you need to make them whole, we can swing a bat that a homeowner can't.
Because, I mean, I know that the people that I have talked to, that's wells that they use somebody else, it was $10,000 to $20,000 per 100 feet. That is expensive.
That sounds very expensive.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it was just the company that they used, but then I guess they were also fighting with H&K, trying to be reimbursed for it. But that was what they were told, is that anywhere between 100 feet would be 10, 20,000.
I think I just have to, if they have experienced this expenditure and they are justified in receiving a well and they've not, they should contact us.
But I also think that H&K also should be allowed to tell every other resident that they don't have to use Blum, that they can use any company that they want locally.
I'm sure of that, yeah. I think H&K prefers, and they're not the only place that does it, I'm sure they have some sort of contract with Blum, and they probably control costs that way, but they're not obligated. I mean, if those folks replace their well and do a well, and then H&K may just have to write them a check, and that's that. But as I said, if they're not being, treated satisfactorily, call us, contact us.
Is there any way to get a copy of that contract at all so the other residents can tell?
I don't have, no, there's no way I would have, I'm speculating and said it's possible that H&K and Blum have an arrangement a business arrangement, and that's between them. We don't know that.
Okay, and there's just a couple other things I wanted to mention. Dealing with the quarry drilling, and then also the Pennsylvania Turnpike with them blasting to add the extra lanes on. Do you suspect that's also affecting the wells? Because literally they just went through the mountain right here. So, and people are also saying that they have some structural damage. So who are we holding accountable for both of those two things?
So it's the same thing. If you have concerns that blasting has caused structural damage or has done something to your well, you call our department.
Okay.
You file a complaint and we investigate. It takes very specific amounts of energy to damage things.
Okay.
That is very thoroughly investigated, and it's the same thing. If it's found that they have exceeded the allowable levels in the Commonwealth that have caused damage, this is well documented. It's the same thing. They are held responsible for damaging someone's structure. But again, if you go out there and they find out they're well beneath the allowable limits permitted in the Commonwealth, it'll be found that that blasting did not cause damage to a well or to a structure.
So the other question would be is if your well is, say, 150 feet to 250 feet, and they're at 305 feet, are they gonna tell us, or are they allowed to, or are we allowed to ask them to drill our wells deeper?
The elevation at the bottom of the quarry is elevation 305 feet. And when H&K, this is what they've reported to us, when they replace wells, they shoot for 20 feet deeper than that 305-foot elevation.
Okay.
So the total depth of the well would vary where the well starts. If it's on a ridge, it would have to be deeper. If it's in a valley, it would not need to be as deep.
Okay. The last one is dealing with with H&K. They will be also bringing a quarry in, which just got approved by the supervisors of the township on a 100-acre property. I am within that 200 square miles, or that 2 square miles that everybody's talking about. And they said that they're going to be responsible. Well, obviously, they're not being responsible for Salford Township, so how are they supposed to do this also in Coopersburg at 100 acres when they are only on, which is Naceville, on 5 to 10 acres, is what you had stated?
The Naceville quarry is much bigger than 5 to 10 acres. We'll get you the actual permit and size, but it's much bigger than 5 to 10 acres. And we're not going to speculate on what's not even before us and just apparently cleared local requirements.
Well, I'd like to go to my other township meetings and stuff dealing with that, but who can I make sure that comes to these meetings to address these issues like we're having here? Because it's going to affect us all.
I guess I'm unsure. Are you talking about who from your township?
Yes, like I will make sure that our township residents in Coopersburg will know about the quarry and how H&K has treated everybody in Salford Township. Because as I said, it affects my mom and her family and my neighbors that I've grown up with since 1974. And some of them still live here, some of them don't, but I have met some really nice neighbors, which I'm really happy with. But I just would like to know what we can do to, because it seems like it's going from one township to the next township, and these huge companies are just taking over, and H&K seems to be one of them.
All we can really, so as far as local participation goes, that's really up at the local level. So where there are meetings applicable to the quarry, we don't typically, we won't get involved until there's a permit that we hold that, we have a permitted facility or an application for one. So I don't know who to tell you. I would reckon that your township supervisors or perhaps some folks in this audience would be better to answer that question than me or any of us in DEP.
So would any of you guys be able to, or willing to come to these meetings too?
We have to move on to the
Okay.
next person because we are at time, and we
Okay.
already said we were having a last person
Okay.
2 people ago. So
Thank you.
this gentleman is our last speaker, and
Would
then
you
we'll
be-
close it out for the day because I know it is getting well after time and almost 4:30.
I
so.
just want to know, would they be willing to come?
You can send the invitation, but I can't make promises of the date, time, location, things that are happening, and we can't really weigh in on any of those conversations.
Okay.
DEP is, we have responsibilities, and that would fall outside of our daily routine.
Okay. Well, thank you very much,
You're
and thank
welcome.
you for coming and helping us residents here.
Just given the acknowledgement that there might be significant underreporting of the number of wells that are affected, would it be possible to proactively send out like a mail-out survey to all of the residents of the town?
That would come from the township.
Okay.
But if anybody that is listening in and anybody does want to submit a complaint, we do encourage you to submit that to the resource account. It's ra-pottsvillemining@pa.gov. Please send those requests, complaints, so that they can get investigated. Thank you.
I mean, people might not be aware. It'd be better to proactively say, are you having a problem with your well?
Thank you.
Stephanie, I have something from the township, a question, and then just closing comments. The groundwater modeling submission that is being held right now, is it possible that that is to you in advance of an application from H&K to dig deeper?
We don't have anything to speak to that. You would have to speak with
So there
H&K.
is no application at this moment from H&K to dig deeper?
There is not an application in the department to mine deeper at the quarry at this time.
Okay, because H&K did let the township know that there was intention to submit an application to dig deeper. So I was just trying to figure out, maybe the groundwater modeling has to be done before that application's there. I don't know.
They could do it before, but usually they do it with. But I think this was in relation to getting more information to reevaluate the groundwater model.
Okay. Closing, Stephanie, I would like to know what are our next steps?
The next steps, again, would be to submit any complaints online to the resource account so that we can follow up with those complaints and concerns. And if anybody wants to add to that?
All the applications we receive and accept are public documents, and anybody can request them. I think we'll offer to share them with you when it's finalized, and we can say, this is the official application. We can either email it to you if it's too big. We'll set up some kind of FTP or SharePoint to get it to you. You can publish it on a website and say, this is what's before H&K or before the department. The department rules are specific about,
Hearings?
I'm sorry, what?
Hearings?
Hearings and notice, public notice from the applicant. So the applicant in this case is H&K. H&K's, if I understand it correctly, right, so this is an application that does not require H&K to do public notice, like run an ad in a newspaper, all right?
Wait, the application for the groundwater modeling?
That is correct.
Submission, okay.
And so we're going to share it with Salford and West Rock Hill Township to do, you know, a more or local and focused outreach to share it with their residents. So that's just want you to know that it's when it's accepted, we'll send it to you or send you a link to download it.
Okay,
And
and there's
then-
no knowledge as to timing of H&K submission to dig deeper?
I don't know of any.
I hope they reject it, because obviously that's the problem. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to see when they start digging deeper, the water starts seeping. Now, if they want to go deeper, you're going to have more problems and probably further than 2 miles out.
Well, so this groundwater model is only going to, they're only going to use to this bottom elevation at this time. They don't have approval to mine deeper, so there won't be any information in there to speak to mining beyond that point.
Would a application to dig deeper require another groundwater modeling?
Yes. And public notice, because it's when you're deepening a well, when you're increasing the size of a quarry, or deepening
So
a
it could be
quarry.
they're submitting 2 groundwater modeling applications, like right behind each other, if they have an application to dig deeper?
We can't see the future, and I've heard the rumors too. So all we can do is review what we have in front of us, which, assuming they get it together, will be a revision to the groundwater model.
But
And-
this will not count as the groundwater model required for a permit application to dig deeper, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Next steps, the questions, but what else? What else?
We mentioned the next steps in filing the complaint earlier. The rest is up to the township on what you'd like to do. I do want to thank our elected officials. I want to thank our county folks for joining us today.
Stephanie, I'm sorry, but I'm not clear on that. What options does the township have to do?
Thanks, Stephanie.
I don't know.
So what we do for each well complaint individually and when we receive this many, we still look at each well complaint under our rules. We have rules that we must follow, and that's, you can find them at 77-533. And that's how we call each well complaint. There's a gentleman earlier mentioned that, hey, this is a bigger problem than any one person's well, and it's clear that that's the case. And I don't, and as I mentioned, me as the district mining manager, I don't have the power, authority, budget to say, we're gonna do these studies, we're gonna figure out this bigger picture, but I can pass that along to people who may. And that's one thing I'm gonna do.
On what?
This has been happening for years, so it's not just been a recent couple months situation. We're finally getting you here to speak to the entire community. I appreciate you saying that now, but how, like, you did say that you were going to do that when you spoke to us last year.
I don't remember that, but so the next step is that
Informational.
you have, and also, I mean, Salford and other townships have as Senator or Representative McKenzie pointed out, a potential to consider public water as well. It's another option. So these are the things we have to consider.
Listen, we want to thank everybody for joining us once again. I know this is a very contentious meeting, and I know that is very emotional for a lot of you. We do what we are allowed to do under the regulations. If anybody has a complaint, again, please submit those complaints to our resource account, and we will investigate those well complaints. Thank you so much for joining us.